This doesn't start in a boxing ring. It doesn't start with cameras, flashing lights, or a roaring crowd. It starts late at night, in a small, forgotten gym, and with a man who wasn't supposed to be real. The lights were dim. The air smelled of sweat and old leather. The heavy bag swayed slightly, even though no one had touched it for minutes. Outside, the city slept. Inside, history quietly waited. Muhammad Ali was already the greatest boxer on the planet, champion of the world, a global icon, a man whose name alone could fill arenas. And yet on this night there was no press, no entourage, no championship belt resting nearby. Just Ali and a rumor. Years later, Ali would say something that confused even his closest friends. Rocky Balboa wasn't just a movie character. Ali said, that man existed. People laughed it off. They assumed he was joking, or exaggerating. But Ali didn't laugh when he said it. Because this story wasn't born in Hollywood. It was born in silence. The kind of silence that only exists when egos are stripped away and pride is all that's left. Ali had heard whispers about a man, a fighter with no fame, no titles, no reason to be in the same room as the heavyweight champion of the world. A man who didn't fight to win. He fought to last. No contracts were signed. No money was promised. No one was supposed to know. This wasn't a spectacle. This was a test, not of skill but of spirit. Why would Muhammad Ali, at the peak of his power, agree to box someone the world had never heard of? Why would he risk embarrassment when he had nothing to gain? And why was the footage, if it ever existed, never meant to be seen? This wasn't about belts. It wasn't about legacy. This was about pride. Because when you are truly great, it's not the champions you fear. It's the unknown man who doesn't know when to fall. The kind of man who keeps standing long after logic says he shouldn't. That night, Ali didn't step into a ring to prove he was the best in the world. He stepped in to answer a question that had started haunting him. What happens when unstoppable talent meets unbreakable will? Have you ever heard a story so strange it feels fake? Until the details start lining up? Because once you hear what happened next, you'll understand why Muhammad Ali never forgot the night he boxed the real Rocky Balboa. At that moment in history, Muhammad Ali wasn't just a boxer. He was the center of gravity in the sports world. Wherever he went, cameras followed. Reporters crowded. Crowds leaned in just to hear him speak. Ali didn't need to throw a punch to dominate a room. His presence did that for him. He was in his prime. World heavyweight champion. Fast hands. Faster mouth. Ali floated through fights the way poets move through words. His footwork looked unfair. His timing felt prophetic. He saw punches before they were thrown, and by the time opponents realized what had happened, they were already behind on the scorecards, or flat on the canvas. He had beaten giants, men bigger than him, men stronger than him, men who were supposed to end his reign. None of them did. To the world, Muhammad Ali was untouchable. Inside training camps, there were no doubts spoken out loud. Trainers nodded. Sparring partners obeyed. Friends agreed with whatever Ali said, because when you're winning at that level, disagreement disappears. Glory creates silence. Ali thrived in it. He joked, he rhymed. He predicted rounds with a grin that felt almost disrespectful. And then he delivered, over and over again. Speed was his weapon. Confidence was his armor. Belief was his oxygen. But there's something people misunderstand about champions like Ali. They don't fear the men they can see. They don't fear rankings, records, or reputations. They fear the unknown. Because known opponents can be studied. Known opponents can be timed. Known opponents play by the rules of the game. The unknown doesn't. And that's why this moment matters. Most legends are protected by their reputation. Their teams carefully select opponents. Their mystique is guarded. Risk is minimized. Ali was different. He didn't just defend his greatness, he tested it. He wanted to know if it was real. That's when the whispers began. Not from reporters, not from promoters, from fighters. Quiet conversations in gyms, stories shared after sparring sessions, half jokes that stopped being funny halfway through. There was a man. No titles, no spotlight, no polish. A man who didn't fall. They said you could hit him clean, hard, repeatedly, and he'd keep coming. They said he trained like someone who had already lost everything, like pain no longer scared him, like exhaustion was just another place to live. Ali heard the stories and smiled at first. Everyone has a myth attached to them. Boxing is full of exaggerated tales. Most of them crumble under bright lights, but this one lingered. Because the stories weren't dramatic, they were quiet. No talk of knockouts, no claims of dominance. Just one sentence repeated again and again. He doesn't stop. Ali asked questions, not publicly, not loudly, just enough to feed his curiosity. And the more he learned, the more uncomfortable the idea became. Not because the man sounded dangerous, but because he sounded different. Ali had built his career on breaking men's confidence, on making them doubt themselves before the bell even rang. But how do you intimidate someone who doesn't care about winning? How do you outlast someone who has already accepted suffering? That question followed Ali. And slowly, the calm world of dominance he lived in began to feel incomplete. Because when you're truly great, there's only one opponent left to face. The one no one can explain. The man didn't arrive with noise. No entourage. No cameras. No dramatic introduction. He walked into the gym like someone reporting for work. That was the first strange thing. In a world where everyone wanted a piece of Muhammad Ali, where fighters begged for opportunities, shouted for attention, and promised knockouts, this man said almost nothing at all. He wasn't famous. He didn't have a record anyone recognized. No championship photos. No newspaper clippings taped to lockers. A blue-collar fighter. The kind who trained before sunrise and after long shifts. The kind who wrapped his own hands and cleaned his own mess. His body told a story Ali had never seen written this way before. Not sculpted for speed, not built for beauty, built for endurance. Scars layered over scars. Knuckles thickened by years of abuse. Shoulders that didn't relax even at rest. This wasn't a man who fought for applause. This was a man who fought because it was what he knew how to do. When he finally stood in front of Ali, he didn't stare him down. Didn't flinch. Didn't bow either. He spoke calmly, respectfully. "I don't want to beat you," he said. That alone caught Ali off guard. Most men in that position tried to look fearless, or defiant, or delusional. This man sounded honest. "I just want to last." The room went quiet. Ali smiled, but it wasn't the smile the world knew. Not the showman's grin. Not the playful mockery. It was slower, curious. "Last how long?" Ali asked. "As long as I can," the man replied. No round predictions, no bravado, no insults. Just a simple request. Ali laughed, but not fully. Because there was something unsettling about a man who didn't care about winning. A man who only cared about not breaking. They talked, not in front of reporters, not on record. A private bout, no judges, no audience, no official winner. Just rounds. As many as it took until one man decided he was done. No money exchanged hands, no contracts signed. If anyone ever asked, it never happened. That was the deal. To Ali's team, the idea sounded ridiculous. Why risk injury for nothing? Why waste energy on someone unknown? Why even acknowledge a challenge that didn't elevate the brand? But Ali waved them off, because something about this man bothered him. Not his strength, not his skill, his calm. This wasn't hunger for fame. This wasn't desperation. It was acceptance. The man trained like someone who had already lost everything worth losing. Like pain was familiar territory. Like exhaustion didn't scare him, it comforted him. Ali had faced fear his entire career. He had seen it in eyes across the ring. He had heard it in the breath between rounds. He had felt it in the way opponents rushed, panicked, and made mistakes. But this man didn't carry fear. That made him dangerous, not because he could beat Ali, but because he couldn't be broken the usual way. Ali agreed, not to humiliate him, not to teach him a lesson, but to answer a question that had been growing louder in his mind. What happens when talent meets someone who refuses to stop? Because legends aren't truly tested by champions. They're tested by men with nothing to lose. If you were the greatest boxer alive, would you risk your legacy just to satisfy your curiosity? As the night of the private bout drew closer, something about Muhammad Ali began to change. The people around him noticed it first. There were fewer jokes in the gym, fewer rhymes. The playful teasing that usually filled the space faded into long stretches of silence. Ali still trained hard, but differently. He moved with focus, not flair. He listened more than he spoke. Between rounds, he didn't boast. He thought. There was no film to study, no fight tape to rewind, no weaknesses to circle in red. Ali had built his greatness on preparation, on seeing patterns before they unfolded, on knowing his opponent better than they knew themselves. This time, there was nothing to analyze. Just stories. Stories of a man who kept standing. Stories of a man who didn't slow down when others did. Stories that sounded less like boxing and more like survival. That was when Ali realized the truth. This man didn't fight to win. He fought to survive. That distinction mattered. Winning has limits, survival doesn't. Ali's greatest weapon had always been confidence. He broke opponents mentally before the first punch was thrown. He made them doubt themselves, rush their attacks, abandon discipline. Fear did most of the work for him. But this opponent didn't fear Ali. not because he believed he was better, but because losing didn't scare him. And that unsettled Ali more than any trash talk ever could. Late at night after training ended and the gym emptied, Ali stayed behind. He sat alone on a bench, hands resting on his knees, breathing slow and steady. No cameras, no applause, no witnesses, just a man and his thoughts. He thought about pride, about how much of his identity was built on dominance, on being the fastest, the smartest, the most untouchable. He thought about humanity, about the limits everyone pretends don't exist until they're tested. Ali had always believed speed could solve anything, that brilliance could outmaneuver brutality, that confidence could bend reality in his favor. But this fight wasn't about brilliance. It was about endurance, about how long someone could keep going after logic said stop. That question lingered. What if I can't stop him? Not knock him out, not embarrass him, just stop him from coming forward. Ali didn't say the thought out loud. He didn't need to. It followed him through road work, through shadow boxing, through sleepless hours staring at the ceiling. This wasn't fear. It was something deeper. Respect mixed with uncertainty. Ali understood something few champions ever admit to themselves. There are opponents you beat with skill, and there are opponents who force you to confront yourself. The night was coming, and for the first time in a long time, Muhammad Ali wasn't preparing to prove he was the best in the world. He was preparing to find out how far his greatness really went. There was no announcement, no crowd countdown, no spotlight sweeping across a packed arena, just the sound of a bell echoing inside a quiet gym. And with that single ring, the fight began. From the very first seconds, Muhammad Ali looked exactly like the champion the world knew. Light on his feet, hands low, eyes sharp. He circled effortlessly, snapping quick jabs that landed clean and precise. The kind of punches that disrupt rhythm, steal confidence, and make opponents second guess every step forward. The man absorbed them, not easily but without panic. Ali slid to the side, fired combinations, pivoted away. His movement was poetry in motion, each step calculated, each punch placed where it hurt most. Any other fighter would have cracked early, but this one didn't. He didn't rush, didn't swing wildly, didn't complain when shots split his guard. He just kept coming. Round after round, Ali landed beautiful punches, sharp hooks, crisp jabs, perfectly timed counters. The sound of leather against skin filled the room. Still, the man stayed upright. No grimace, no plea for a break, no visible frustration. Just forward pressure. Ali noticed it. At first it amused him, then it puzzled him. By the middle round, something subtle began to shift. Ali was still in control, but not complete control. His breathing changed. Not labored, but noticeable. The effortless rhythm slowed by a fraction. His footwork, still graceful, required more intention. The man across from him looked the same. Same pace, same posture, same refusal to back down. The punches that would normally end exchanges didn't end anything here. Ali stepped back between rounds, chest rising and falling a little deeper now. For the first time, arrogance faded. Not replaced by fear, but by respect. There was no crowd to react, no roar to feed off, no boos or cheers to distort reality. Just gloves brushing skin, just feet sliding on canvas, just breath echoing in the space between them. The silence made everything louder. Ali landed a clean combination jab, cross, hook, sharp enough to stop most men cold. The man staggered for half a second, then stepped forward again. That's when Ali understood. This wasn't a contest of skill anymore. It was a conversation. How long can you keep doing this? How long can I? Ali adjusted. He stopped chasing knockouts. He conserved movement. He picked shots more carefully. The man didn't adjust at all. He absorbed, advanced, endured. Sweat dripped onto the canvas. Breathing grew heavier on one side. Ali's mind raced. Speed had always been enough. Timing had always been enough. Confidence had always been enough. But talent alone was meeting something it couldn't rush past. Will, round by round, the question grew louder. How do you beat someone who refuses to quit? There was no anger in Ali now, no showmanship, just focus. Every exchange carried weight, not because of damage, but because of what it revealed. This fight wasn't about who hit harder. It was about who would stop first. Ali glanced at the man's eyes during a brief pause. They weren't defiant. They weren't hopeful. They were steady. And in that moment, Muhammad Ali felt something he rarely did inside a fight. Not doubt, awareness that greatness has layers, and some of them can't be trained. Have you ever realized, mid-challenge, that talent alone isn't enough? The later rounds felt heavier. Not because the punches were harder, but because everything else was. The air inside the gym had thickened. Sweat soaked the canvas. Each breath echoed longer than before. Time itself seemed to slow, stretching the space between movements. Muhammad Ali no longer looked like a man performing. He looked like a man measuring something invisible. Then it happened. Ali saw the opening. A half-second gap in the guard, a slight delay in a step forward. Instinct took over. He planted his feet and unleashed a perfect combination, fast, sharp, flawless. A jab to blind. Across that snapped the head back. A hook delivered with the kind of precision that had ended fights and silenced arenas around the world. It was the kind of sequence that drops champions, the kind people remember forever. The man staggered, his knees bent. For a moment gravity reached for him. Then he stayed standing, no dramatic recovery, no defiant gesture. He simply steadied himself and raised his guard again. Silence filled the gym. No bell, no shouting. Just the quiet realization settling into the room. Ali didn't rush in. He didn't follow up with fury. He stepped back. Not because he was tired, because he was thinking. Years of instinct screamed at him to finish it, to press, to overwhelm, to prove superiority the way champions are expected to. But something stopped him, not mercy, recognition. Ali saw the truth clearly now. This man wasn't surviving because Ali lacked power. He was surviving because he refused to fall. Ali lowered his hands slightly. The movement was subtle, but intentional. The message was clear. The fight changed in that instant. Ali stopped throwing full power. His punches became measured, controlled, not pulling away, but no longer searching for an ending. The man noticed. He didn't celebrate, didn't smile. He understood. They circled slowly. Two men bound by respect rather than aggression. And then Ali spoke, quietly, so softly it almost blended into the sound of breath in the room. "You're real." No audience heard it. No camera captured it. But it was the most honest thing Ali said that night. The bell finally rang, not for a knockout, not for an ending. Both men stepped back. No raised arms, no victory pose. Just nods. The fight was over. And somehow that felt more powerful than any finish. Because Ali didn't walk away having proven he was unbeatable. He walked away having learned something rarer. Strength isn't just domination. It isn't always about who falls and who stands tall at the end. Sometimes, true strength is acknowledgement. The ability to recognize an unbreakable will and respect it. That night, Muhammad Ali remained the greatest boxer in the world. But he also became something else. A man who understood that not all victories require a knockout. When it was over, the world never knew. There were no press releases, no headlines declaring the result, no ringside photos, no dramatic interviews. Only whispers carried quietly from one person to another, stories that grew in hushed tones, stories that lingered longer because they weren't meant to be public. Muhammad Ali returned to his life as the champion everyone already knew. But something had shifted, something subtle, almost imperceptible, in the way he moved, in the way he carried himself. The fight, though private and unseen, left an impression stronger than any belt. Because this wasn't about who won. It was about what happened when raw determination met unmatched skill. Some say that night inspired Rocky Balboa, not the movies, but the man who became the legend on screen. Or maybe, in truth, Rocky had always existed somewhere. Ali had simply confirmed it with his gloves. Rocky wasn't fiction. He was perseverance made flesh. The part of humanity that refuses to stay down, no matter the odds. The part that keeps moving forward when logic says you should stop. The part that forces even the greatest to recognize strength in ways no knockout ever could. Ali didn't box a man that night. He boxed perseverance itself. He tested the limits of what it means to face something unyielding and to recognize it when it stands before you. When the gym emptied and silence returned, the lesson lingered. Strength isn't always about domination. Sometimes it's about acknowledgement. Sometimes it's about respect. Sometimes it's about seeing someone else endure and understanding that endurance has its own power. That night, Muhammad Ali walked away with no victory announced. But he carried with him an understanding that no title could convey, and the man who wouldn't fall carried it too, in his own quiet way. These stories are rare. They don't need spectacle. They don't need applause. They live in memory, in the quiet recognition of those who witness them, and in the lessons they leave behind. And this story is just one of many waiting to be told. More powerful, untold stories are coming. Stories that challenge what you think you know about heroes, legends, and the true meaning of strength. Which part of this story stayed with you the most? Was it the man who refused to fall? Was it Ali realizing that skill alone isn't enough? Or was it the silent acknowledgement that endurance is its own kind of victory? Share your thoughts. Tell us which legend you want explored next. Because these are the stories that remind us greatness isn't always measured by what the world sees. Sometimes it's measured by what survives in silence. And that, above all else, is worth remembering.